Billionaire spots his black maid's son hiding to eat leftovers, and instead of calling security, instead of yelling, he quietly picked up his phone and made a call that would change 3 lives forever. In that moment, under the cold glow of a luxury kitchen at midnight, a billionaire and a hungry child locked eyes across a world of marble floors and silent suffering. The boy couldn't have been more than 9 years old. His oversized t-shirt hung off his thin frame like a hand-me-down from someone twice his size. His worn jeans had patches on the knees that weren't meant to be fashionable. They were there because his mother couldn't afford new ones. And there he was, crouched behind a kitchen island that probably cost more than his family's entire apartment, stuffing cold chicken into his mouth like he was afraid the food might vanish before he could swallow it. His cheeks were full. His hands were trembling. And when those footsteps echoed across the floor, and he looked up to see the silhouette of one of the wealthiest men in the country standing over him, something broke in that child's eyes. What came next, no one in that house ever saw coming. Not the staff who had worked there for years. Not the family who took their wealth for granted. Not even the boy's own mother, who at that very moment was scrubbing bathroom tiles just 2 floors above, completely unaware that her entire life was about to change. Stay with this story until the very end, because buried inside this night is a truth about power, pain, and the kind of wealth that money can never buy. This is a story that will make you question everything you think you know about the people who serve in silence, about the men who sit in towers of glass, and about what it really means to see someone who the world has made invisible. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Whether you are sitting in New York, Lagos, London, Toronto, or somewhere I have never even heard of, I want to know. Because stories like this one connect people across borders, across backgrounds, across everything that usually keeps us apart. And if you are new here, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Not because I am asking, but because what we do here matters. Every week, we bring you stories that will move you, challenge you, and maybe even change the way you see the world. So subscribe and join this family. You will not regret it. Now let us go back to the beginning. To understand what happened in that kitchen, you need to understand the man who owned it. His name was Lawrence King. Some people called him a genius. Others called him ruthless. He had built a fortune worth over $3 billion from absolutely nothing. His face was on magazine covers. His name was whispered in boardrooms across the globe. He had the kind of power that made politicians return his phone calls within the hour. But Lawrence King was not born into any of this. In fact, he was born into the exact opposite. Long before the tailored suits and private jets, Lawrence King was just Larry, a scared kid sleeping on a sagging couch in a one-room apartment with a mother who worked 3 jobs and a father who disappeared the moment the bills came due. Larry knew hunger the way some kids know the names of their favorite cartoons. It was constant. It was familiar. It lived in his stomach like a second heartbeat. He remembered hiding behind dumpsters to eat scraps that restaurant workers threw away. He remembered the shame of watching other kids open their lunchboxes while he pretended he was not hungry. He remembered his mother coming home late at night, exhausted and broken, slipping cold leftovers onto his plate and whispering that this was all she could find. She would say, "Don't tell nobody, baby. The food's still good, just not pretty enough for the customers." And Larry would eat every bite, not because he was grateful, but because he had no choice. Hunger has a way of tattooing itself on your soul. It never really leaves you, even when you have more money than you could ever spend. Larry made a promise to himself back then. He said, "I will be so rich, so powerful, that no one I love will ever eat somebody's leftovers again." And he kept that promise. He clawed his way through scholarships and rejection letters and doors that slammed in his face. He worked jobs that broke his back while studying for exams that broke his mind. He heard the word no more times than he could count, until one day, someone finally said yes. And from that moment on, Lawrence King never stopped climbing. He built an empire by outworking, outsmarting, and outlasting everyone around him. He collected companies the way other people collected stamps. He bought properties, hired armies of employees, and surrounded himself with people who only told him what he wanted to hear. But somewhere along the way, something happened. The higher he climbed out of his pain, the more he forgot what it felt like to be in it. He forgot the boy who hid behind dumpsters. He forgot the shame of eating scraps. He forgot what it meant to be hungry and invisible. He built walls so high around his heart that even he could not climb over them anymore. And that is who Lawrence King had become by the time a woman named Evelyn Walker walked through his front door for the first time. Evelyn was the kind of woman the world walks past every single day without seeing. She was 43 years old, though life had drawn lines on her face that made her look older. She had worked as a housekeeper, a hotel maid, a nanny, and everything in between. Her hands were rough from years of scrubbing other people's dirt. Her back ached from bending over toilets and bathtubs that would never be her own. But Evelyn carried a strength that ran generations deep. Her mother had cleaned houses. Her grandmother had picked cotton. Her ancestors were people whose names this country never bothered to write down. And yet, here she was, still standing, still fighting, still believing that maybe, just maybe, her son could have a different story. Her son's name was Morgan. He was 9 years old with bright eyes and a curious mind that never stopped asking questions. He loved science and comic books and dreamed of one day becoming an engineer who built things that helped people. He was Evelyn's entire world. Everything she did, every floor she scrubbed, every bus she caught at 5 in the morning, every meal she skipped so he could eat, it was all for him. She used to whisper to him at night when she thought he was asleep. She would say, "You're not going to be stuck like we are. You hear me? You're going to sit in offices, not clean them. You're going to sign checks, not pray they don't bounce." And Morgan would listen, pretending to be asleep, his heart swelling with a love he did not fully understand yet. He would think to himself, "I'm going to buy you a big house one day, Mama, with no leaks. And you ain't never going to scrub nobody's floor again." Evelyn got the job at Lawrence King's mansion 3 years before the night everything changed. It was the best-paying job she had ever had, and she treated it like gold. She arrived early. She stayed late. She never complained. She never asked for favors. She said yes, sir, and no, sir, and kept her head down and her hands busy. She walked past rooms filled with art that cost more than she would make in 10 lifetimes. She polished silverware that had probably never been used. She dusted shelves that held awards from galas she would never be invited to. And every single day, she walked past a kitchen where more food was thrown away in one meal than she could afford to buy in a week. There was a rule in that house, a strict one: absolutely no food removal from premises. It was framed on the wall in the staff break room, signed by Lawrence King himself. Something about liability and lawyers and policies that protected the rich from the consequences of waste. Evelyn understood the rule, even if it broke her heart. She watched trays of perfectly good food get scraped into garbage bags while her own son sometimes went to bed with nothing but water in his stomach. But she never said a word. She could not afford to. This job was the only thing standing between her family and the street. Then came the day that changed everything. It started with a phone call. Evelyn was on the bus heading to work when her phone buzzed. It was the school. Morgan had fainted in class. His blood sugar was dangerously low. The doctor wanted to know if he had been eating regularly. Evelyn felt her heart drop into her stomach. She knew the answer, even if she did not want to admit it. On days when the bills piled too high, she skipped meals so Morgan could eat. But sometimes, even that was not enough. Sometimes, breakfast was just a glass of water and a promise. "I'll make it up to you, baby." She rushed to the clinic and found her son lying on a narrow bed, weak and pale, but trying to smile for her. He said, "Hey, Ma, I'm okay. Just hungry." Those 2 words hit her harder than any punch ever could. Just hungry. Like it was normal. Like it was nothing. The doctor warned her that this could not continue. Morgan needed regular meals. His growth, his concentration, his future, everything depended on proper nutrition. For a mother already breaking herself to keep the lights on, hearing that her son's hunger might steal his future was a weight she did not know how to carry. After that day, Evelyn found herself staring at the trays of leftover food at the mansion with different eyes. She watched the chef scrape entire platters into the trash. Roasted chicken, grilled vegetables, fresh bread, enough food to feed her entire apartment building. And all of it, straight into the garbage. One afternoon, she gathered her courage and quietly asked the head housekeeper a question she had been too afraid to ask for 3 years. She said, "Ma'am, if it's okay, could I maybe take some of this leftover food home? For my boy?" The housekeeper looked at her with a mix of pity and fear. She glanced at the framed rule on the wall and shook her head. "You know the rules, Evelyn. Mr. King doesn't want food taken out. Liability, he says. Lawyers. Please, don't ask again." Evelyn nodded, swallowed the lump in her throat, and went back to scrubbing. But the hunger in her son's eyes followed her everywhere. 1 week later, everything fell apart. It was a rainy night. Thunder shook the windows. Evelyn's sister, who usually watched Morgan while she worked the evening shift, called at the last minute. She could not come. A family emergency. Evelyn stared at the clock. She was due at work in 20 minutes. She had a choice. Miss work and risk losing her job, or take Morgan with her and risk breaking another rule. No children of staff on premises. She looked at her son's thin frame, at the way his clothes hung loose on his body, at the circles under his eyes from nights when sleep could not quiet his hungry stomach. She made her decision. Put on your jacket, baby. You coming with mama. But you gotta be quiet, you hear? She snuck him in through the staff entrance and tucked him into a small storage room near the back of the house. She gave him her own sandwich, the only food she had packed for herself. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "I'll be just out there in the kitchen. Don't move till I come get you, okay?" And then she went to work, praying that no one would find him. Hours passed. The dinner party upstairs ended. The guests left in their expensive cars. The kitchen staff began their cleanup. And Morgan, alone in that dark storage room, woke up hungry. The sandwich was gone. His stomach growled so loudly he was afraid someone might hear it. And then the smell hit him. Roasted meat. Fresh bread. Something sweet, like dessert. It drifted through the crack under the door and wrapped around him like a cruel invitation. Hunger does not care about rules. It does not ask for permission. It just moves. Morgan crept out of the storage room and followed the smell to the grand kitchen. The lights were dim. The staff had left. Silver trays sat on the counter, still half full, waiting to be thrown away. He looked around. No one. He opened a container and began to eat. Fast. Desperate. Like a child who had learned that food might disappear at any moment. And that is when the footsteps came. Lawrence King had not planned to visit the kitchen that night. He had been in his study, reviewing contracts, when a strange restlessness pulled him downstairs. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was something else. He walked through the darkened halls of his own mansion like a ghost, loosening his tie, reaching for a glass of water. And then he heard it. A small sound. Metal against metal. A clink. He paused. He turned. He walked slowly around the kitchen island. And there, crouched in the shadows, cheeks stuffed with cold chicken, hands trembling, was a boy. For a moment, neither of them moved. The billionaire and the hungry child, frozen in time. Lawrence's face hardened. His voice was cold. "Who are you? What are you doing in my kitchen?" Morgan tried to speak, but the words got stuck in his throat. He swallowed the food in his mouth and stammered, "I'm sorry, sir. My mom, she works here. I was just. And then the kitchen door burst open. Evelyn had realized Morgan was gone from the storage room. She had searched frantically, her heart pounding, until she heard voices coming from the kitchen. She burst in and saw her worst nightmare come to life. Her son, her boss, a container of stolen food. Her world collapsed in that single second. She dropped to her knees and pulled the container from Morgan's hands. Her voice broke as she spoke. "I'm so sorry, Mr. King. He didn't mean to. I'll pay for the food. Please." "Morgan, what did I tell you?" She clutched her son like he might disappear. Her entire body trembled. This was it. This was the end of everything she had worked for. She was going to lose her job. They were going to lose their apartment. Her son was going to pay the price for her desperation. Lawrence King stood there in silence. His eyes moved between the mother and the child. He saw the worn shoes on Evelyn's feet. He saw the patches on Morgan's jeans. He saw the fear in their eyes, the kind of fear that comes from a lifetime of being one mistake away from disaster. And something stirred inside him. Something old. Something buried. Something he had spent 40 years trying to forget. He slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Evelyn's heart stopped. She thought he was calling security. She thought he was calling the police. She thought her life was over. But Lawrence King did not call security. He did not call the police. Instead, he dialed a number he had not used in years. And when the person on the other end answered, he said only 6 words. "I need a favor. It's urgent." Evelyn did not understand what was happening. She knelt on that cold kitchen floor, holding her son, waiting for the blow to fall. But it never came. Lawrence ended the call and looked at her with an expression she could not read. "Get up, Evelyn." She stood slowly, still clutching Morgan's hand. "How long has he been coming here?" She shook her head frantically. "Never before, sir. I swear. Today my sister couldn't come, and I didn't have anyone to watch him. I know I broke the rules. Please, I'll go. Just please don't call the police. Lawrence stared at the half-eaten food on the counter. His voice was quieter now. You're scared of the police because your son ate food that was going in the trash? Evelyn did not know how to answer. How do you explain to a billionaire that in your world, one wrong move can take everything from you? Even if that wrong move is just being hungry in the wrong house. Lawrence asked her a question that caught her completely off guard. When was the last time you and your son ate a proper meal? Not scraps. An actual meal. Evelyn hesitated. We eat, sir. We're fine. But Morgan, innocent and honest, blurted out the truth before she could stop him. Mama, we only had crackers yesterday. Evelyn squeezed his arm, but it was too late. Lawrence absorbed this information in silence. Then he spoke again, and there was something different in his voice now. You clean this house every day. You walk past more food than most people see in a week. And you go home, and your boy has crackers? Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. I'm not asking for charity, sir. I just need this job. I can't lose this job. Lawrence did not respond immediately. He turned and walked to the window, looking out at the rain, lost in a memory she could not see. What happened over the next few days was unlike anything Evelyn had ever experienced. Lawrence King did not fire her. He did not punish her. Instead, he began watching. He watched as leftover food was thrown away. He watched the staff eat cheap, rushed meals in a cramped break room. He overheard one of the maids on the phone, worrying about bus fare. He noticed the worn shoes on the cleaning staff, the tired eyes, the way they moved like ghosts through a house that was never meant to see them. For years, Lawrence had only seen numbers on spreadsheets, profit margins, quarterly reports. Now, for the first time in decades, he was seeing people. A week later, Evelyn received a message that made her blood run cold. Mr. King would like to see you and your son in his study. She dressed Morgan in his best clothes, which were still a little too small. They walked down a long hallway lined with portraits of wealthy, powerful men, none of whom looked anything like them. When they reached the heavy wooden door of the study, Evelyn's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. She was sure this was the end. Instead, it was a beginning she never saw coming. Lawrence sat behind a massive desk, papers spread in front of him. He gestured for them to sit. Then, without a word, he slid a piece of paper across the desk toward Evelyn. She picked it up with shaking hands. It was a scholarship offer. A full scholarship to one of the most prestigious private schools in the state. For Morgan. Evelyn's voice cracked. I don't understand. Lawrence leaned back in his chair. I called in a favor. They had one full scholarship open for an incoming student. If your son passes their entrance exam, he can start next semester. All expenses paid. Uniforms, books, meals, everything. Evelyn shook her head, overwhelmed. Why would you do this? Sir, I can't pay this back. I don't have anything. Lawrence looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something vulnerable in his eyes. I didn't ask you to pay it back. He paused, then continued. When I was your son's age, I stole food too. I hid to eat it because I was ashamed. One day, someone caught me. The owner of a diner. He could have called the police. He could have had me thrown in jail. Instead, he gave me a job washing dishes and the first clean uniform I'd ever worn. He saw a hungry kid, not a criminal. Lawrence's voice grew softer. I built this entire life trying to outrun that boy I used to be. And then the other night, I saw him again. In your son's eyes. There was silence in the room. Only the ticking of a grandfather clock and the sound of Evelyn's quiet tears. Lawrence continued. I can't go back and feed the boy I used to be. But maybe I can make sure this one doesn't grow up hating hunger the way I did. He looked at Morgan. Maybe I can give him a chance to sit at tables where decisions are made and remind the people there that someone in the kitchen is always watching, always hoping, always deserving of a seat. Evelyn could barely speak. But there has to be a catch. People like you don't help people like us. Not like this. Lawrence nodded. You're right. There are conditions. He listed them carefully. Morgan had to show up every single day. He had to work twice as hard as the other students because life would expect that from him. Evelyn had to stop skipping meals to feed her son. He was raising her salary and adding a food allowance. And the final condition was the hardest. No more hiding. If she was struggling, she had to tell him. He could not fix what he did not know. Then Lawrence did something that shocked not just Evelyn, but everyone who worked in that house. He announced a new policy. Effective immediately, there would be a staff meal program. Leftovers would be packaged properly, with food safety standards met. Whatever was not used by the family would go to the employees and their families, not to the trash. The news spread through the mansion like wildfire. Staff members who had worked there for years, who had watched food being thrown away while their own children went without, stood in the break room and cried. One older woman who had been cleaning Lawrence's floors for over a decade said it was the first time she ever felt seen. Morgan did take that entrance exam, and he passed. He started at his new school the following semester, wearing a uniform that fit him properly for the first time in his life. He carried a backpack that was not held together by tape. He ate 3 meals a day, every day, and slowly, the circles under his eyes began to fade. It was not easy. The other students came from wealthy families. They had tutors and summer homes and parents who donated buildings. Morgan had none of that. He had something else. He had a mother who had sacrificed everything for him, a memory of what hunger felt like, and a determination that no one could take away. He studied harder than anyone in his class. He stayed after school to ask questions. He joined the debate team and the science club. And every time he felt like giving up, he remembered the night he hid in that kitchen, terrified and ashamed, and the man who could have destroyed his family but chose to lift them up instead. Years passed. Morgan grew. Evelyn continued working at the mansion, but now she walked through those halls with her head held high. She was no longer invisible. She was respected. She trained new employees. She helped other struggling mothers navigate the resources that were now available to them. And Lawrence King, the man who had built walls around his heart for 40 years, slowly began to take them down, one brick at a time. He did not become a saint. He was still demanding, still intense, still the kind of man who expected excellence. But he was also the kind of man who remembered. He visited schools to speak to underprivileged students. He funded scholarships quietly, without press releases or photo opportunities. He sat in his kitchen some nights, alone, eating a simple meal, and whispered a thank you to the boy he used to be. On graduation day, Morgan walked across the stage in front of hundreds of people and received an award for outstanding achievement and community leadership. Evelyn screamed so loud from the audience that people 3 rows away started laughing. Lawrence was there too, sitting in the back, clapping quietly, wiping something from the corner of his eye that he would never admit was a tear. After the ceremony, the 3 of them stood together for a photograph. A billionaire, a maid, and the boy who had once hidden in a kitchen to eat leftovers. They did not look like family, but in that moment, they were. Today, Morgan works in community development. He helps design programs that provide food security and educational opportunities to families just like his. On his desk sits a framed photograph of that graduation day. Next to it is a small container, silver and dented, that Lawrence gave him years ago. It is the same container Morgan was eating from the night everything changed. Lawrence had kept it all those years as a reminder. So let me ask you something. If you were standing in that kitchen, watching a scared boy eat from a silver tray, what would you have done? Would you have called security? Fired his mother? Looked the other way? Or would you have done what Lawrence did and seen yourself in that child's eyes? Do you believe people like Lawrence truly change? Or do they just wake up for a moment before falling back asleep? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think. And if this story stirred something in you, do not just click away and forget it. Hit subscribe and join this community. We bring you stories like this every week. Stories that make you think, that make you feel, that remind you that the world is more complicated and more beautiful than it often appears. Because stories like this are not just entertainment. They are mirrors. And sometimes, the only way to see ourselves clearly is through someone else's story. Thank you for staying until the end. Not everyone does, but you did. And that tells me something about who you are. Until next time, take care of each other. Remember that the person serving your food, cleaning your office, or driving your bus has a story too. And maybe, just maybe, be the person who asks to hear it.